If you can hear me once, clap your hands. I always feel like I'm in kindergarten, but sadly we are all in kindergarten because it works every time. Welcome everybody to the 12th annual, new name this year, Alumni Story Salon, formerly known as Haas X. I will already start to embarrass the most humble Tenny, who started this. This was her brainchild, so Tenny. And I was incredibly privileged to be tapped by Tenny to be the MC. So I don't have the big role today. They do. But let me tell you who I am. I guess that would be helpful. My name is Kellie McElhaney. I have been here at the Haas School of Business for 22 years. That's like, that boggles my mind. I've been through a couple of different roles and started a few different endeavors and centers. The current center that I founded and run is called the Center for Equity, Gender, and Leadership. And just a quick aside, I have never, ever done harder work, more complicated work, more challenging work than is the space of equity today. I promise, Tenny, I will not go off on a tangent, but I will for a little second. Equity is about absolutely basic, fundamental human needs. It transcends gender. It transcends race, ethnicity, geographic origin. It is simply about humanity. It is about belonging. It is about being seen and heard. And so all of this false information about how it is being politicized right now, I would love it if you all in the Haas community, who I think get it, who have power, who have privilege, would just shut down the arguments, just try to engage in generative dialogue, because there's not enough of it today. And that's my commercial. Now, I also should say really quickly, I have the privilege to work with companies who get it. Forget the headlines. They're not backing off. They might be flying under the radar, but I work with companies every single day through Berkeley Exec Ed and my consulting practice, Inclusify, with top-tier CEOs and leaders who aren't backing down. So don't believe the headlines. It is complicated, but there are highly committed, very successful leaders and businesses still committed. Okay, this afternoon's program, we have 6 Haas alums. I'm looking at them all in the front row. They have worked incredibly hard, even though they all have really demanding work lives, family lives. They have worked incredibly hard on today's experience. We'll talk more about the prep at the end and other people I'll recognize. But let me just jump in. A couple of ground rules. The most important thing, hashtag Haas alumni, hashtag Haas reunion. We would love to spread the word about how amazing our graduates are, very loudly, and particularly if you can shout it down 45 minutes south. That would be fantastic. No Q&A during the talks. We just go in rapid fire succession. And save your questions. There's wonderfully great cocktails, maybe just wine and beer, toss, but outside in the courtyard after this. And so here we go. I'm going to introduce our first speaker. Carmen Palafox is our first speaker. The title of her talk is The Long Game, Lessons in Grit and Legacy. So have you ever climbed a mountain on skis? Because Carmen has. She is a member of the Executive MBA class of 2014. Do we have any peers in here? I knew you'd be here. How are you? I love it. She's no stranger to pushing her limits, from conquering marathons to backcountry adventures. She thrives on endurance challenges, but her drive doesn't just stop there. Join us as you watch this same spirit and how she translates it into the world of venture capital, where patience, discipline, and grit are the keys to unlocking long-term positive transformation. Carmen. Yeah.
All right. So I am standing on my left leg. There is sweat dripping down my back and into my eyes, and just a few glides forward, I will turn the corner onto flat land where everyone else is gathered. I put my right ski down and it slips as if I'm standing on quicksand. This is April 13th, 2024, just 2 weeks ago in the backcountry of British Columbia. We started this ascent at 8:30 in the morning and skinned up almost 2,000 feet to reach the perfect peak. I am feeling a heightened sense of fear and pressure to not fall. I take a deep breath. I do everything that the guides told me. Put all your weight on your heel, stand upright. I take another deep breath and I switch to blackout mode and I go. In the backcountry, a slip is costly. If I injure myself, I ruin everyone's experience. And medical attention is a very expensive helicopter ride out. So I cannot fall. And this mantra is something I'm very familiar with in my career as a venture capitalist. I'm the founding general partner at 2045 Ventures, and I'm Latina. Latinas represent a small slice of the venture community. We manage 0.5% of assets under management. Of the 4,000 firms in the United States, there are about 15 that are majority owned by Latinas. So I know that my success or my failure will translate and form perceptions of what Latinas are capable of in venture capital. There's a mantra in venture capital that all good deals get done. Have you heard that before? But how can you tell at the very early stage when there's no product, there's no traction, there's no data, right? It's all about the people. That is the same in the backcountry. In the backcountry, it's the lead guide who makes all the decisions. What peak are we going to summit? What line can you take down? When is the day over? Our lead guides were skiers. But Jeff, my husband, and I are snowboarders. And if you ski and snowboard, you know we're different. We have different equipment. Snowboarders like deep pow. We hate traverses. And so as we got more comfortable and gained confidence in the backcountry, we started to see good lines that we wanted to take. But in each instance, we had to ask for permission. Could we take that line? And that's why I decided to start 2045 Ventures, because the truth is that the power lies with the decision maker. And so at 2045 Ventures, I am the decision maker. I get to decide which deals get done. And I have 20 years experience in finance and 8 in venture, so I know how to avoid the avalanche. I know which deals to pick for the best outcome. So as a Haasie, I am driven to challenge the status quo. And in venture capital, that means asking the question, why is this persistent gap in funding for women and underrepresented founders? Why does that exist? I'm motivated to fill that gap because of the changing demographics in the United States. Just look at our labor force. Look at the youngest section of our labor force. There is no racial majority. I'm also motivated by all of the amazing women that are diving in to start companies. And this thirst for knowledge from women, underrepresented groups, to learn more about how to invest in venture. And I'm empowered by this growing body of data that shows that women and underrepresented founders return more capital to investors. In fact, in March of 2024, TechCrunch spotlighted a study. This study was of unicorn founders from 2013 to 2023, and the results are incredibly inspiring. The results are that 70% of unicorn founders have a female immigrant or underrepresented founder on the team. That's right, wow. And so, you know, in the backcountry, we had no internet. So 7 days I got to think about this. And I got to think about how to play this long game. And the key, I realized, is to change perceptions, right? And so getting through that long game and reaching this summit is incredibly hard. It takes a lot of grit, takes a lot of sweat and tears. And in the backcountry, the way I was able to summit was with that encouragement, with my hype people. In the backcountry, I had a tail guide named Ricardo who would clear a new path when the path felt like quicksand. He would tell me, "You got this, Carmen. Don't let your mind run away. You can do this. You're almost there." And in life, I have Jeff, my husband. I have my mom. I have my classmates, my friends, and my investors. They all know that the long game, the way we win and the way we summit, is by each success story, each female founder, each immigrant founder, each underrepresented founder that wins. This is how we change the game. This is how we have more inclusivity in tech and how we reach the perfect peak. Thank you very much.
I told you it's good. And it's not about fake facts, it's actually about facts, right? So Latinas manage 0.5% of the capital. You know, women, 70% of the unicorns have been on their founding team a woman, an immigrant, or underrepresented minority. I mean, these are facts. This isn't something that is just made up, and yet perception isn't actually mirroring those facts. If you have the power and privilege, what I'm thinking about is how can we make the long game a heck of a lot shorter? If you have that power and privilege, let's use it as Haassies. Number 2 speaker today is Kris Charisma-Primm. Yes? The title of his talk is When Should We Go All In on Our Passion? He is a Haas full-time alum from 2014. Yeah. So much about him I love, but this fact is really fun. Kris grew up in a hippie commune in a Hawaiian rainforest. So I very inappropriately asked him if he was medicinally enhanced today. He's not. But he was raised to believe that working for a just and sustainable world is the rent that all of us pay to live on the earth. I came to Haas to learn the business side of social impact. 10 years later, he has finally dropped everything to go all in on his passion. So are you ready to do so? What's holding you back? And tell us how to do it. Kris, thank you.
So less than 2 hours ago, I learned that I lost someone super important to me in my family. And so if I get overcome by emotion, I may need you to give me the energy. So with that, last year, Father's Day, my kids were running around in the sun. I was holding my mom's hand. We were looking at the ocean. And then later that day, she took her last breaths after a battle with cancer. And in that moment of heartbreak, I tried to reflect on how grateful I was that my mom could even know my kids, and that her dreams for a more just and sustainable world lived on in me and in my children. And I tried to reflect on how grateful I was that my mom was the first in her family to go to college and broke the cycle of poverty so that I could be in a place like this. So my mom was weird, right? I mean, she raised me in the back of a rainforest on a hippie commune. Like, try to imagine the world's biggest tropical flower arrangement. I grew up in that. Yeah. Barefoot, of course, picking my fruits for breakfast and my vegetables for dinner. And it was an amazing way to grow up. But life outside the commune was complicated because I was trying to figure out and understand the vastly different American experiences that exist in my family and that exist in me. So my mom's side, 4 generations ago, fled extreme poverty in the Philippines to come to America, and they worked on these sugarcane plantations. As a child, I remember feeling so guilty that while I got to grow up in the flower arrangement, my cousins, 4 generations later, were still in the cycle of poverty and domestic violence and gangs and teenage pregnancy and jail and all the things. Then on the other side of my family, my dad's side, we can trace our roots back to the birth of America. I'm related to Daniel Boone, who was one of America's first folk heroes and who led these key militias in the American Revolutionary War. And trying to understand these differences in my family growing up was so tough. And we've come so far, but we have so much more work to do. My mom tells me that even at her own wedding, she was asked to stay in the kitchen with the other people of color. And so now I saw my family overcome these racial differences. I saw them learn to love each other. And they did all of that. They did the hard work of changing their worldviews, motivated by their love for this fat, little, mixed-race baby. So now that I'm a father of 2, I think about what's the hard work I need to do to leave a better world for my kids. And 2 years ago, I'm at the hospital, my mom's battling cancer, my kids are running around, and I decide I need to go all in on climate. I must. I whip out my laptop, I put together the family budget, I use skills from Professor Tasker's Designing Financial Models at Work, blue numbers, show it to my beautiful wife, and I say, please, may I please take a year to work on climate change? And she says, take 6 months. Deal. So I start doom scrolling all the crazy climate science and getting inspired by all the crazy climate solutions, and I'm thinking we could do this. And what I learned is that in order for America to do our part to clean up the mess that we've made, we need to close the left-right political divide on climate. We seem so polarized as a country right now. You're either team boots or team Birkenstocks, and each side thinks the other side is crazy. But we got to figure out how to overcome this. And it's wild, because the politicians, the characters, we see them playing on TV. It's like, how can we cross this bridge? But I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen in my own family. So as I continue to do my research, I learned 70% of Americans, whether you're Democrat, Republican, or don't give a shit about politics, are united. United that we must address extreme heat, floods, hurricanes, the things affecting us in our family. But what do we do when 70% of us want to fix this problem, but the politicians don't seem to be able to pass the gridlock, and there's lobbyists and all the stuff? What do we do? So I learned there's this tool called direct democracy, where in half the states in the country, the people could put climate solutions directly on the ballot. They could leapfrog the partisanship, leapfrog the lobbying, and vote, reclaim our laws to basically address climate change. So the clock is running, right? I got 6 months. I'm running out of time. And I get introduced to who I lovingly call the Muhammad Ali of ballot propositions. He's the greatest of all time with great values. He founded an organization that's won 33 out of 35 statewide ballot propositions across 17 different states. He's used it to empower people to vote for increased minimum wages because it's hard to make ends meet on $7 an hour. He's used it to increase access to health care because even the most vulnerable of us need help when we're sick. And most recently, he's used it and asked people, would you like to protect reproductive rights in your Constitution? And the people of Ohio and Michigan said yes, and Arizona's next. So I met him and I said, Muhammad Ali, the ballot propositions, would you please teach me how to put a climate solution on the ballot in California? And he said, Kris, we're going to launch a 10-year program, and we're going to try to put climate solutions on the ballot in as many states as possible, every election cycle until we fix the problem. And so I think about my mom, I think about my dad, I think about my family in Texas, I think about my family in Hawaii. I think about the protesters on both sides that I just saw down at Sproul Hall. I think about how blessed I am to come to a place like Berkeley Haas, which has transformed my life's opportunities. And I believe like Ted Lasso, I believe that if we put climate solutions on the ballot in half the states in America, I believe that more than 51% of us will unite to vote and save what matters most to us. Thank you.
Talk about traversing the back country to have lost a family member 2 hours ago, and grit, and our sincere condolences are with you. I'm gonna cry, but it's your crying, so over to you. But I've known Kris, and gratitude is just for me the first theme that comes up when I am in your presence. And again, that's a human theme. That is not on that. I don't know if Boots or Burks have more gratitude, but I'll leave that. But I really like that construct. In direct democracy, there is never more of a time for us to exercise direct democracy than right now. All right, so next we have, for number 3, Adrienne Hogg. She is 1986 for undergrad, double bear. 1986 for undergrad, evening MBA class of 1994. Anybody in those 2 years? Another common theme that unites all of us on both sides of all of these topics is her topic, what leading with kindness could look like. Often one of the few, if not only, persons in the room that look like her, Adrienne's leadership style embraces the humanity of individuals as a way to forge a path for organizational success that values people and not just profit. She was 30 years working in finance, whether for large public companies or small businesses, or leading on nonprofit boards. In all of those areas, she has found herself championing for those who are underserved, overlooked, or simply dismissed based on biases. Her leadership journey during her life has been very important preparation for the work she's doing today, which is the co-executive director of Community Works, a small Oakland organization-based nonprofit that supports youth, adults, and families impacted by incarceration. So, Adrienne.
Deep breath. I am probably one of the few, if not only, people who didn't hate middle school. Well, I was born in Oakland, and I graduated from high school in Oakland. I actually spent half my youth on the peninsula in Menlo Park when my mom had a job as a school psychologist in the Ravenswood School District. This was Menlo Park when it was more valley and less Silicon. more orchards and fewer office parks, more working class families and fewer Ferraris. And my middle school years at St. Raymond's on Santa Cruz Avenue were pretty great. In fact, I liked middle school a lot. Oh yes, there were the unrequited crushes and the start of puberty, and the year John Kuntz and I lost the student body president VP race to Joe Bentley and Dee Dee Mitchell. A small class of 28 kids, more cousins than classmates. And it was during this time that I really got a glimpse of the type of leader I would be in the future. It happened in all places in phys ed. I was standing on the side of the volleyball court in my red PE shorts and my white t-shirt and my black high-top Converses. And each PE class, a student was chosen to be captain. And they got to decide where to move people around on the court and who to sub in. And most of the students emulated the PE teacher, Mrs. O'Donnell, who was really tightly wound and shouted a lot. When it was my turn, I took a different approach. I huddled all the kids together. I let them decide where they wanted to be. There were a lot of pleases and thank yous that I gave out. And Mrs. O'Donnell looked at me one day and she said, "Wow, you're really nice to them." I didn't understand what she meant. I was just being me. Mrs. O'Donnell went on to make me captain more than any of the other students. I didn't realize it on that day in phys ed that this was the leadership style that I would go on to have. We grow up believing that to be a leader, you have to be rude and brash and unforgiving. I actually think the opposite, that leading with kindness and compassion can be profitable, both personally and professionally. In my 30 years in business, I have lived through the micromanagers, the mean girl colleagues, and the maniacal CEOs. The keynote speaker at my Haas undergraduate commencement was Ivan Boesky, who said, "Greed is good." Too bad for him the FBI was listening to. As a senior director of finance at Chiron, a biotech company, I was implementing the SOX program and I oversaw a slew of consultants. But I did have one direct report, an admin named Hope. As my colleagues came in to welcome me to Chiron, they'd poke their head in, and when I told them about my admin, they would laugh or chuckle. And finally, I asked one of them, "Well, what's up with that?" And they said, "Oh, she's not very nice and she doesn't do good work. We all call her hopeless." So I got along with Hope really well. I laid out what my expectations for her job were. I learned that she adored her grandkids and that she wanted to travel more when she retired. Her work and her demeanor improved, and my colleagues began to use her for their admin needs too. One day, one of my colleagues came to me and she said, "What'd you do to improve Hope's work?" And I said, "Well, for starters, I didn't think of her as hopeless." In my current role as co-executive director of Community Works, a nonprofit that aims to prevent people from entering justice systems and improve outcomes for those who do, my philosophy of leading with kindness is now my mission. I lead a group of people, 70% of whom, there's that 70 again, 70% of whom are system impacted themselves to do the hard work of transforming justice through policies and programs rooted in humanity and healing. We work with people who are not at their best when we first encounter them. We have to think that they are more today. We have to think of them more today and what they can be tomorrow. Every day we draw on humanity and kindness to take hurt people who have hurt people to be better for themselves, their children, and their community. We have a program called Project What. What stands for We're Here and Talking. This is a peer-led youth development program for 12 to 18-year-olds. Project What's goals are to reduce stigma, raise awareness, and improve policies for children of incarcerated parents and their families. One day I was helping one of the adult coordinators fix a projector. And despite being tired and hungry, the kids came into the program after school. And because I am not Beyonce or a can of Pringles, I was invisible to them. They went around the room and they began to talk about how their day was going. And they got to Amari, and Amari said his day was really bad. His teacher had asked him something, and he got mad, and he cussed her out, and he got thrown out of class. So the peer mentors went around the room giving him advice on how he could handle that situation better in the future. Take a deep breath before you speak, one said. Ask the teacher to explain to you what she really wants next time, another said. Then the most senior peer mentor spoke, and she kindly and calmly said, school is important, so sometimes you just need to shut the fuck up. I was invisible, so I just leaned hard into that projector. I stifled a laugh, and I said a silent amen as a parent. But it was said with such kindness and grace that Amari just nodded his head and took it all in. Later, I reflected on the kindness that these young leaders gave each other as they dispensed advice born out of mistakes and hardships that they had already faced in their young lives. Without the salty language, it's the type of kindness and humanity that I lead with each day. You can too. So in a world where you can be anything, be kind. Thank you.
You see why it's so intimidating to be a professor in this crowd? Thanks a lot. I mean, hats off to Mrs. O'Donnell, but my takeaway is to not be her, but be the Adriennes of this world. Be the Adriennes of this world. A line that really grabbed me is how we treat people influences how people show up. So we have a lot of power and privilege to have an impact on how people show up. I would love to say your line in the classroom occasionally, but somehow I don't think I'll go over very well. But I would have giggled too as a parent. All right, our fourth speaker is Steve Peletz. Yeah. I was going to give away the photo, the slide, but I won't. Well, maybe I will. The title of his talk is When Sharks Come Calling. He is also a double bear, Steve is, 1983 for undergrad, an MBA class of 1999. I love it. In 2019, Steve did a pivot from his career into the for-profit world to spend more time in the ocean, supporting marine conservation and research. He is an underwater photographer, a research diver, and a board member at Migramar, which is a nonprofit dedicated to protecting turtles, whales, sharks, and rays. This is super cool. He's currently filming and co-producing a documentary called Shark Finale. Fin, get it? It actually took me a few minutes, which highlights the deep challenges that biologists face as they fight to protect migratory species from overfishing and overdevelopment. He publishes his stories in print and online. Don't go on yet, listen to him, and then go online, including at Deep Blue Monthly, which he launched to cover ocean conservation up close. He is celebrating his 25th MBA reunion. Don't forget, by the way, hashtag Haas Alumni, hashtag Haas Reunion, and I'm really excited to listen to Steve's talk. You all will love this.
Thank you, Kellie. My family and friends sometimes accuse me of being obsessed with sharks, but that's not the full story. From a young age, as a 5-year-old splashing in the ocean, in the surf in Southern California, my parents couldn't get me out of the water. Covered in sand, salt, and seaweed, they begged me. Occasionally, I would comply. And then later at Haas, as an undergrad, I found at Berkeley a research diving class in the zoology department. So I took the class, and I came back to teach for many years. Then more recently, as Kellie mentioned, I pivoted, gave up my day job, for-profit world, and went all in to marine conservation and science. Now I volunteer as a research diver, I film underwater, and I write about the amazing animals we see in remote places and those here in California. So I'd like to share 2 stories that I think give a small example, a small sample of why I decided to go all in on conservation. So the first story is about this picture, but going to Tonga in the South Pacific. And there it's renowned for humpback whales birthing their calves. And you'll find many couples, a mother and calf, in the ocean. And you can snorkel there. It's regulated to keep it a little under control. And you'll see these calves, they're newborn, they're pretty massive creatures, and they're spinning around in the water, they're splashing, they're jumping, they're like puppies. And they'll come up close, and it's super enjoyable to see. But even more important are the mothers, and they're nurturing. Sometimes there'll be a male escort. But the mothers are very cautiously watching over their babies and making sure we, these aliens, don't get too close. But on one dive, we were on the surface, and this mother pushes her baby, happens to be this pair, pushes her baby up so close to us, we could see closely the back of the whale. And this poor calf had 2 large chunks, like crescent-shaped, half-moon-shaped bites out of its tail. Clearly a tiger shark had bitten it. And the mother seemed to want to show us, we were in the water for 40 minutes, she pushed it forward and wanted us to see. It was as if she wanted us to empathize, to sympathize with her poor baby. Now the whale was okay, it would swim around in circles and splash and play, but at that moment I thought, these creatures are amazing. They're just like us. The parenting skills are just like ours. And so after seeing this in the water, it was deeply concerning for me to know that just 40 years ago, in the 1980s, we were still decimating the whale population. It wasn't until the 80s, when we put bans on whaling, did we stop destroying these populations of whales. And now some of them are able to come back. Some populations, yes, some not so much. But with sharks, it's a totally different story. So today, we're killing 100 million sharks per year by all estimates. And it's in large part for shark fin soup or fish in fish tacos. And I learned about this shark finning when fishermen would slice off the fins of a shark brought on board the ships and then toss the sharks back into the water to die or drown or be eaten. So when I was invited to Cocos Island in the Pacific, it's 350 miles out off of Costa Rica, and I was invited to a shark research expedition. And I was invited by a shark biologist, a Costa Rican shark biologist named Randall Arouse. He was a member of an organization called Miramar. And this group of 22 scientists tag and track sharks and use their migration data to push countries in the Americas to create, expand, and connect marine protected areas across the Pacific. And they've been very successful. And their goal is to protect migratory animals, whales, turtles, sharks, other bony fish, from overfishing. So when I had the opportunity to go to Cocos Island, we spent 10 days at sea, And my dive buddy and I, Elpis, well, I volunteered to tag a shark. And I didn't know much about sharks at that time. But my buddy and I put our tanks on, and we rolled into the Pacific off of our skiff and dove down a sheer rock wall. And so here I go, a place known for tiger sharks. And I was lucky. My first attempt, I spot a 10 to 12-foot tiger shark at about 100 feet depth below. So I took off at a 45-degree angle, hoping to intercept the shark. As I got within 5 feet, the shark did something I didn't expect. It turned to face me. And for the first time, I was greeted with this huge, broad head, this big, round eye, and a mouthful of teeth that looked like skill saw blades. I had this incredible urge to swim in the opposite direction. Fortunately, I didn't. That might have triggered a predatory response. But the shark and I sat there looking at each other, and I was certainly thinking, who's the predator and who's the prey in this situation? And it felt like the shark was feeling that same way. But fortunately for me at that moment, the shark turned, swept its tail back and forth, and disappeared into the blue. But thus ended my first attempt in failure. Fortunately, the next time I tried to tag a shark, I was successful. And this one small act gave me a sense of pride. The simple act of placing an acoustic tracking tag on a shark using a spear gun underwater allowed the scientists to know where that shark was migrating. And that information proves useful. But at that moment, more importantly, I was hooked. Hooked on shark science, hooked on conservation. Now, I'm advising. I joined the board. I'm advising the Mi'kmaq scientists. They're really great at what they do. They can definitely use someone who can do spreadsheets, work with financial plans, and come up with strategic plans. So I'm much more consequential in my work using skills I learned here at Haas to help the scientists be more effective. As Kellie mentioned also, I've committed to working on a short documentary on the legal and political challenges these scientists face in trying to do the right thing. And I feel like it's important work. It's certainly important to me personally because we need healthy oceans, and healthy oceans need biodiversity. They need sharks. Sharks perform a cleaning function and a balancing function. As a friend once put it, they eat the dead, the dying, and the dumb. Every time I go in the ocean, I realize how vast, how magical, and how powerful it can be. But I also realize if we disrupt natural systems at sea, we'll destroy everything. All lives on the planet, including our own. Thank you. I'm done.
Another person who's gone all in. Another person who's taking seriously the rent we pay to live on this earth. Take a lot of grit to stare that kind of a thing in the face. I really just, the nurturing, the version of Shark Tank that you talked about is much better than the other version of Shark Tank. And I had to keep focused when you talked about the dead, the dying, and the dumb. I had some human faces run through my head, but I tried to stay focused on the shark. I'm not going to get political, Tenny. Omar Garriott is our next speaker, our second to last speaker, for me, sadly, because I could sit here for another 2 hours. The topic, well, first of all, don't let Omar tell you that it was me who kept him from graduating with distinction. It was an A-. I mean, come on, Omar. He will not ever let me live that down, but he's doing all right anyway. His title is The Mac Truck and a Wiser Way of #adulting. Omar was a graduate of the Haas full-time MBA class of 2009, repping the AXE cohort. Anyone? He spent the last 15 years post-Haas managing education products and business lines in big tech while running a startup and writing a bestseller. He is a relentless, and I can attest to that even when he's arguing a grade, he is a relentless searcher of avenues for impact and even deeper human connections, another theme that shouldn't be that radical. He recalls his first semester of organizational behavior class here at Haas. He stated his life mission is all about spreading love, personally and professionally. He did say it elicited chuckles at the time, but he was not actually referring to hooking up with classmates. He regrets in this moment, but he's going to talk about this, that sometimes he loses sight of the spreading of love mission because #adulting. But he promises to make up for it today. So Omar.
Okay. Thanks for allowing the security blanket. Hafez wrote, "Out of a great need, we are all holding hands and climbing. Not loving is a letting go. Listen, the terrain around here is far too dangerous for that. We are all holding hands and climbing. Not loving is a letting go." Said another way, we're all profoundly connected. When we fail to remember that, we fail each other. So in our lives, there are, of course, acute times when we're acutely aware of this, when the need is great and the terrain is dangerous. I call these our Mack truck moments. By the time you get to my age, a Mack truck will almost certainly drive right through your friggin' life, right? Chances are it'll blindside you. Congrats, you are now #adulting. Real adulting, not my roommate won't put his dishes away. The Mack truck, it blares its horn, forces you to deal with it, and transforms your entire life. Job loss, infertility, infidelity, parenting our parents, addiction, illness, mental illness, divorce, death, and so on. If you get squeamish, maybe look away. Here's the Mack truck that drove right through my life at age 35. Aggressive liver cancer. And prior to this, I had been a good Haas MBA, right? I was on the corporate fast track. I was accumulating brands and power and dollars and taking myself way too seriously. Suddenly, none of that mattered. I was facing a series of surgeries, including a live liver donor transplant. This is my belly after that. And a really long recovery. In the year 2017, I spent more time in a hospital than I did at home. So what happens when the Mack truck hits? Right? Most of you have probably experienced this. But what happens when you stand back up? It's less bucket list, though I definitely made those, and more perspective shift. What you realize is three things. One, that control is largely an illusion. Second, that you do have complete control over one thing, which is your relationships. And that a fulfilling life has human connection at its core. Third, that we must be broader in our conception of those connections. That it's that's more about community, and community is more than family or our close friends. Building real connection, though, requires both giving and receiving, right? Indiscriminate giving, even. So giving. When I came back to work after all this, my team, for like the first time, said, "We actually like you, man. You seem chiller. You're making time for the small talk. You see us," right? And it's true. I wasn't in such a rush. I also started a practice of sending a note to a different colleague each week who I appreciated and CCing their manager. But B, we got to be really open to receiving if we want to form these connections. Our pride so often gets in the way of that, right? Newsflash, real adulting is actually hashtag adulting, is actually the process of standing back up from Mack truck after Mack truck, sometimes maybe pickups and SUVs, right? Our ability to do that relies almost entirely on other people. Not a few people, a lot of people. Not sporadically, regularly. So yeah, I'm brave and I'm tough and all of that. But what helped me most to get through cancer was community. That I felt community at its most vibrant. And really from this Haas alumni community. So go Bears. They showed up, so many of them, in ways and even people that I didn't expect. They visited me in the hospital. They just rang the doorbell at my house with a casserole and cookies. They took me out to dinners and to watch Cal basketball lose. They texted me awesomely cringe dad jokes and made YouTube playlists and invited me into their fantasy football league, which I'm pretty sure they let me win. They made a video with messages of support. And it was really illuminating for me to see the messages that came in. It was not, oh, you had that amazing insight in class or at work, or we're so in awe of the impact you've made in your career. What they said was, I remember that one time that you asked me how I was doing, and you really listened to the answer. Not loving is a letting go. Here's the thing. That community, it dissipated over time, right? That's what happens. That amazing feeling of being held up, it was ephemeral, even though I still craved it and I still needed it. So my question is, why? Why is it only when the poo hits the fan that we really show up for each other? Does it need to be that way? Because we need that, not just in times of trauma, but through all the complexity of hashtag adulting. We need a fundamental reorientation towards others and away from the compulsion to turn inward. In many ways, to say society's definition of success is not enough. To get my piece and take care of my family and to grab a drink once a month for, with a parent of a child that I can mildly tolerate. Sorry. American dream or American nightmare? I asked the question. You know we have a loneliness epidemic in this country, right? Surgeon General's warning last year about it. 40% of adults are lonely. And middle-aged Americans fare way worse than their European counterparts. We are extremely lonely compared to them. And why is that? We're insulated from each other. We insulate ourselves from each other. When was the last time you had a Parisian-style, 6-hour dinner with 8 friends and 8 strangers who became your friends by the end of the night? I'm living the American dream, the one most of us dreamed about when we were sitting right here, and the ones that the MBAs I currently work with dream about, right? I work I have a great job, I have a big house, I have the sports car, I have 2.5 kids, etc. I made it, right? But I don't know my neighbors. I can't build real community unless I join the country club, and I suck at golf. I don't know who to call to watch my kids if I need to. I don't know who to call in the middle of the night when I have to go to the hospital because I'm getting a septic episode. And trust me, it's not for lack of trying. It's that the family unit in this country is so freaking impenetrable. Sometimes I wonder, should I have like an open house, but not with my house on the market, just to have an open house? So the thing I want to impress upon you is that this idea of building community, real community, this is not a nice to have, you guys. This is vital. This was literally my deathbed epiphany. We are all holding hands and climbing. Have you guys seen the Harvard happiness study? Like the longest longitudinal study of human life, it's 8 decades. And what is the key to a happy and actually long life? Actively cultivating a broad base of relationships. Not hoping it'll happen, active. Not small c community, broad. Remember how great you felt when you were a student here, right? here in these hallowed halls, why do we view this as the best time in our lives? Why do we fly across the country and the world to come back here? It's not the ops class, sorry. It's the community, right? It's all of us. It's feeling connected to lots of people. Just like I myself have, though, post-cancer, we make the inward turn, right? We forget that. We forget to look up and reach out, even though we intuitively know that's what we need. We know that's the buffer against the Mack truck. Really the only buffer against the truck's Mack and pickup even. We are so freaking busy, but busy with the wrong things. We try to sleep 8 hours and eat well and work out, but we forget the most important thing, which is our social fitness. We invest in mutual funds, but not in relationships. We react instead of proacting. And here I need to say a word to the worst offenders, which are my fellow men. We are so bad at this. We are like so bad at this. 1 out of 5 of us say that in the past week we've gotten emotional support from a friend. That's less than half the rate of women, right? No coincidence, women live longer. And I think we just, as men, have an opportunity to reclaim a new, grown-ass version of masculinity that asks that question, how are you doing, and really cares about the answer, right? We don't have to put everything on our partners as we get older to fill every role, which is an impossible task, and that's what men do. Their circles shrink over time, right? We don't have to settle for friends of convenience who happen to be at the soccer game every week with us. And by the way, travel sports, can we chill out? We cannot hang out on weekends. Enough with the travel sports. I ask people, yeah! We have to be like rabid seekers of connection. I actually ask people on mandates. And when we do that, I start with my own vulnerabilities, right? I start with that because that is the soil that real connection can emerge from. I want to give you one Haas example, which is a group of my best friends from Haas who continue to be my best friends. They are mostly Indian guys, so I call them the Brown Tourage. We get together often, and we do Zooms when we can't. But we have a simple agenda for these get-togethers, and it is this. We go around and everyone checks in. And we do it for as long as it takes to get through stuff. We don't let you get away with surface updates, right? And the other thing is we don't add distractions. Men are so good at that, right? We have, all of our hanging out is event-based. Well, here we are in New York City last year, and I was like, maybe we should go to a Knicks game. Naveen here is a really big fan. And immediately everyone's like, no, it's too hard to talk, right? We are guys saying that. So we need to normalize non-awkward, non-event-based hanging out. Let me just close with a few more things we can all do to normalize happier, normalize some things to become happier and more resilient adults and better friends. To embrace big C community and the micro and macro acts of love. We can really listen to friends and Uber drivers alike. We can create accountability to get outside ourselves. I used to volunteer with a group of Haas alumni, then we'd sit a meal and debrief on the experience. We can explore co-housing. I have never found someone who wants to do this with me, but ping me if you're interested. I'm jealous of the commune. We can make parenting, which is hard AF, right, more of a team sport, like they do in other countries. That village mentality, right? I've started giving birthday gifts to friends of babysitting plus a prepaid concert ticket. We can show up with a casserole on a regular old Tuesday night. We can accept the trade-offs of needing to be the perfect worker and the perfect parent and the perfect friend, and maybe we can start to choose more wisely. We can be huggers instead of handshakers. We can give an unprovoked compliment to a coworker without an ulterior motive. We can make small talk before the meeting, and we can linger after it. We can peel ourselves from our phones and our headphones. We can let others in. So, the richness of life, it tracks one-to-one with the fullness of the community we build. Remember, active, build. proactive. We can choose black and white or life in Technicolor. I know what I choose. So here's my new addition. This is 2-month-old Asher. For this guy, for his dad to be the best version of himself, the best and happiest parent he can be, I pledge not to make my life only about him. Won't you join me? Thank you.
So thanks for making happy that I'm a female. I'm going to live longer. I'm past middle age, so I'm not as lonely. I'm not lonely. I'm past middle age. And I'm not an ops professor, so thank you for that. Not loving is a letting go. That is fabulous. Invest in your social fund. Being human is a team sport. Back to connection, back to basic fundamental needs that all of us have the ability to advance. You only have complete control over your relationships, your connections, and your community, and definitely not your kids. So we are at our last speaker, Tracy Baldwin. She's our 6th speaker today. She is a graduate of our Berkeley Columbia Executive MBA class of 2004. No offense to Columbia, but she said in our green room that she affiliates much more strongly to Berkeley. The topic of her talk, the title is Tech Less, Talk More, the Gift of Human Connection. So we do not give speakers themes. They each get to bring their own story, but you always hear themes that connect them all. Tracy's upbringing in her family's grocery store instilled in her invaluable life skills at a very young age, rooted in service and connections. This foundation carried her through various roles, including serving as a captain in the U.S. Army. Currently, she runs her own company that she founded, RocketMed, where human connection is integral to its success. She's celebrating her 20th MBA reunion this weekend. The title of her talk, which, by the way, is focused a bit on the impact that technology has on our kids. I don't know if you saw the Jonathan Haidt article in The Atlantic, was it? Pretty much likened giving our kids technology to giving them gin and tonics, which most of us would not do. Anyway, turning it over to you, Tracy, for our last speaker today.
It's October 1993. I'm 3 hours into a night shift. I'm a first lieutenant stationed at an army hospital in Germany. The phone rings. I'm the nurse in charge, so I go pick it up. Lieutenant Knott speaking. And on the other end of the phone was a very stressed and urgent voice. She said, "Lieutenant Knott, I need you to activate the on-call list. There is a C-9 arriving at Ramstein Air Force Base in the next 90 minutes. It is filled with dozens of casualties. I need you to transition your ward and get to the emergency room as quickly as possible." So in a bit of shock, I hang up the phone. Team and I, we have no idea what's going on. 90 minutes later, with my heart racing, I arrive into the emergency room. And I feel like I'm looking out into a sea of young soldiers who are injured in an event we have no idea about. The environment is chaos, but fortunately there is an ER doc with full control. He's sending multiple soldiers immediately up to the operating room. Many of the soldiers are injured but quite stable. They're triaged. We'll find room for them on the ward. And he says to me, "Lieutenant Knott, take this soldier up to the ICU immediately." So I walk up to the gurney and I prepare to give him a head-to-toe assessment, because this is what nurses do. And I look at his face and I'm instantly paralyzed, because this is the same face as my face. This is the same youthful face of all the soldiers I have just trained with. I look at the middle of his body, and he's got bandages all over. He happens to also be on a ventilator. I know he's probably been shot and burned. And I look to his lower extremities, and I notice he's now an amputee. And I am sick to my stomach. I feel like I want to vomit because I cannot imagine what my life would be at 24 as an amputee. But I know it's not about me, and this is not the time. And so I get my patient up to the ICU. And this environment is equally chaotic, and it's loud, and there's monitors going off all over the place. This 10-bed ICU is rapidly turning into a 20 and a 25-bed ICU. And I'm hooking my soldier up to monitors, and I look over at him, and his eyes are awake. And the fear on his face and in his eyes are palpable. I compose myself. I try to calm my voice because my heart is pounding. He's trying to talk, and I say to him, Sergeant Williams, I'm Lieutenant Knott. You have been badly injured, but you are at an Army hospital in Germany now, and you are in good hands. You are going to be okay. And I see tears running down his face. And his heart is racing. His blood pressure is elevated. I know he's in pain, and I know he is so scared. I reach over and I grab his hand. Sergeant Williams, I need you to try not to talk. And I know you're in a lot of pain, and you are very scared right now. I'm going to give you some pain medication, and it's going to make you more comfortable. It's also going to make you rest. And I can see his facial expression slightly improve, but the fear in his eyes is still there. Sergeant Williams, I know you are frightened for all your buddies, and I have no idea what you've just gone through. But I want you to know they're here, and they're in good hands. In a few days, you are going to be stabilized, and you are going to be on a plane heading back to the United States to be reunited with your family. I need you to be strong right now. I need you to rest for me. Many of you in this room know of this event 30 years ago. These were the soldiers from Black Hawk Down. For me, I look back on this event and I think about what an incredible gift I was given to connect to this individual, to be there, to be 100% present in this moment, to get him through this extraordinarily frightening time. And you may think it was from 4 years of training as a nurse, but it wasn't. It was from 24 years of human connection, of being raised at a time when there was no technology, when every day we made eye contact and we used facial expressions. We could read body language and we actually had conversation. We talked all the time. And technology is so extraordinarily powerful, and it's so important, and I've built a company taking advantage of it. But I know right now, to the statistics that Omar just shared with us, that my teenagers, my 12 and 14-year-old boys, I worry about all the time. 30% of our teens are suffering from anxiety, depression. And the simplest solution I can think of is to tech less and start communicating more. We are wired to connect with each other. We want to do this. It actually comes very naturally when we give ourselves a chance. But it's an uphill battle, I know. I mean, literally, as I'm putting together this conversation, putting it together, stressing over it a little bit, I'm talking with my husband, and in the middle of it, he literally picks up his phone because he gets a text. I mean, it's the addiction and the muscle memory for that device is so powerful. But I also know that muscle memory is really we're capable of it as well. And so when we start putting down our phone and practicing this extraordinarily skill of connecting, we will be able to give and or receive this incredible gift of human connection at a time when we all experience the next Sergeant Williams. Thank you.
Tracy, I can imagine founding a company was nothing compared to that. I mean, wow, you're the kind of nurse that I hope I see. I mean, connection, actually, to individuals is life-saving. And every one of us in this room has the ability to connect. I talk a lot in my classes around inclusion and equity of a phenomenal experiment right now that started in Denmark. It's called the Human Library. And it is a library where you don't go in and check out books, you actually check out humans. Imagine, I was just in Amsterdam. There are a number of cafes that do not have internet service. So this is a small trend, but it's not nearly large enough. So what I think we all got to experience today is the absolute privilege of spending this last hour, I don't know, it felt like 10 minutes, in a human library. Some of the themes for me, the hope and inspiration, pretty quickly after reading this morning's New York Times, I needed that. Yesterday's New York Times, yesterday's The Atlantic. So thank you for that gift. Think about when you leave here, how you can make the long game shorter. We heard that power lies in the hands of the decision maker. You have been, are, and will be decision makers. So what are the decisions you're going to choose to make? Direct democracy could not be any more of a timely theme given the year. Believe, Ted Lasso, I almost cried. I love that. I'm on my second watch of it. Being human is a team sport. I mean, when I sit here and listen to this, remember what happened to Ivan Bosky, even if we're not seeing it today. It can happen again. But when I sit here and listen to this in all seriousness and without any need for notes, I mean, come on. Love, connection, inspiration, hope, not letting go, compassion, empathy, that's not that hard. Like, they just don't feel like really hard things. And yet, we're not seeing it in day-to-day interactions. But this is Haas. I mean, if there ever is a small group of committed citizens, as Margaret Mead said, who can change the world, look at the person to your right, look at the person to your left, because it is going to be this community, it is going to be Haassies. That was hard. I mean, I had 2 more pages of notes, you're welcome, because I'm going to close because there is a bar, I think maybe food, good stuff waiting for us, but again, just huge applause for these 6 Haas alums. Personally, I also love the stories about your spouses and kids and how they prop you up and keep you going. I did like your wife's calculated risk. I was like, I got to take note of that. Thanks to Tenny again, who again is so humble. Please shower her. Thanks to Francesca LeBaron, who is this fabulous. She is a Haas alum of 2019. She is just a tireless advocate for human stories. So she coached our speakers today for the Story Salon. Perhaps also importantly, she coached me on my outfit choice. And I borrowed her shoes. But sincerely and truly, thank you all so much for coming back to campus today, for supporting your fellow and fellowette speakers. for just supporting this school in a really, really hard time to be part of an academic campus. Always hard to be a public institution compared to our private school peers. I promised Tenny that I would say how much we value your support, your connection to Berkeley Haas. And she also made me say the last three things. It is Tenny, but I fully support this. You can support Haas by doing three things: hiring Haas, another year of a difficult job market for our grads, so how can you help? We saw such beautiful help in past, well, there've been like 10 past years of bad job markets, but we always see Haasies reach out and help. Number two, you can help Haas by staying engaged with your local alumni networks, attending events like these. And finally, you can support us by investing in Haas. There's lots of ways, small, large, that your annual donations help us put on events like this and continue to send leaders out into the world. Enjoy the human library. Please continue it out in the courtyard. There are great liquids to fuel that connection. And take care. Have a great rest of your evening.